Hello, I am Jessica Webb. I am an implementation coordinator with the Knowledge Hub at the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children at Western University. On behalf of the Learning Network and Knowledge Hub teams, welcome to our webinar entitled Duty to Support, Supporting Families to Stay Together. This presentation will include a look at findings from a community-led project from RainCity Housing in Vancouver's downtown east side, and then a panel discussion of community-identified harm reduction strategies to address state-based violence from the child welfare system that support families to stay together. We acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape-Wak, and the Attawandaron peoples, on lands connected with the London Township Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. With this, we respect the long-standing relationships that Indigenous nations have to this land as they are the original caretakers. We acknowledge the historical and ongoing injustices that Indigenous people, including First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, endure in Canada. We recognize that many Black people were violently displaced to Canada through settler colonialism and slavery. We accept responsibility as a public institution to contribute towards revealing and correcting miseducation, as well as renewing respectful relationships with Indigenous communities through our teaching, research, and community service. Further, we will continue to work collaboratively with communities to challenge colonialism, anti-Black racism, and further forms of oppression that remain pervasive in Canada and that result in disproportionate impacts of gender-based violence on these communities. We are so happy to be joined today by Lenoy Alcalay, Candace Norris, Lorraine Michelson, and Carrie Stout. Lenoy currently works as the project coordinator at RainCity Housing for this project that looks at addressing systemic violence through harm reduction in the family system. Lenoy is passionate about community approaches to break down this system and believes in addressing the impact of trauma through building and strengthening connections. Candace Norris works as a peer facilitator for RainCity Housing. She is also proud to work in her community as a Dene Cree cultural facilitator and cultural research facilitator. She believes that through healing, we can safely keep Indigenous children out of the Ministry of Child and Family Development and instead foster Indigenous ways of knowing and being to support Indigenous mothers with wraparound care so they can safely care for their own children and relearn what was taken away from them as Indigenous people. Lorraine Michelson is a public health nurse in Vancouver. For over 20 years, she worked at Shiway, a pregnancy and parenting outreach program, which supports women and families who face marginalizing conditions, including poverty, racism, inadequate housing, and substance use issues. Shiway is an interdisciplinary community program located in the downtown east side, which provides harm reduction, healthcare, and social supports to women and their families. Carrie Stout is the program coordinator at Healthiest Babies Possible and Youth Pregnancy and Parenting Program. Carrie has a passion for addressing social determinants of health in order to improve outcomes for families and for future generations. Her passion in supporting pregnant people stems from years of working as a social worker in a variety of settings, including MCFD, Shiway, BC Women's Hospital, and Healthiest Babies Possible. She has seen how the miracle of birth can change people's lives and how supports can be such an integral part of this change. I will now pass it over to Candace to open this webinar with a prayer.
Can you hear me? So I just want to say good morning and say thank you for being here. It's been an honor to be here. We're here on the beautiful Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories. And I just wanted to sing a song to bring in our ancestors to help us do this work, to open our hearts, our spirits, and our minds to be able to address these systematic racism and oppression. So I'm going to sing a wolf song. And why I'm thinking of the wolf song is in our culture, the wolf is they're very matriarchal, they're very paternal, maternal, and they take care of their cubs. So as I sing this song, I just encourage you to think about your own families, your own cubs, your own pups, your own family as I sing this song. We are here. We are here. We are here. We are here. Mi way, Kiti Manas. We are here. 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 We are Thank you, Creator, grandmothers, grandfathers. Spirit of the four directions, Mother Earth, Father Sky, our own spirits. I just say thank you, and I invite you to be with us today as we sit in this circle together, sharing words, sharing knowledge, sharing wisdoms and spirits at this time to create this change. I just pray that you touch each and every one of us, our hearts where our compassion lies, in our minds where the intellect and knowledge is to create these change, and our bodies to stay strong while we continue doing these changes, and to be able to just have some emotional support during these discussions, because all of these discussions are deep and heavy and we have to reach inside. I just pray that you can help us lift ourselves as we look inside to create these changes, Creator. I just pray that you be with our families as we are not with them today. And I just say thank you for watching over us, and that you continue watching over us, all my relations. So that song, it was the water song, which is, I made a mistake in the beginning. It's a water song, and the water is a song that is given to the women to pray for our waters, for our healing, and for the waters. The women carry waters in their uterus when they're carrying a baby. Our blood is made of 80-90% water, something like that. So so the water song is so important that we keep praying for healing for our water. My relation.
Thank you, Candace. We're so honored to be here to present the project that we've been working on the last 2 years. This project has been hosted by RainCity Housing and funded through the federal government by Women and Gender Equity Grant. It has also been supported by many community agencies. The project's focus has been harm reduction strategies in the family system to keep supporting families to stay together. The project was situated in Vancouver's downtown east side, which is in the stolen lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. Vancouver's downtown east side is a concentrated area of poverty, homelessness, substance use, mental health struggles, survival sex work, and crime. The streets hold a tremendous amount of pain. People who live down here have been failed by system after system. For an overwhelming number of these people, the very first system to intervene in their lives and to set the course to these negative outcomes has been the child welfare system. The duty to support is the idea that community has a responsibility to support families to care for one another and keep families together. It is a response to the current mandate to report families whose children are perceived to be at risk. In the current child welfare system, families experience state-based violence that ruptures family structures, contributes to marginalizing women, and perpetuates cycles of trauma. The current system is rooted in colonized practice and reinforces it by disproportionately removing Indigenous, Black, and racialized children and children of families living in poverty. We advocate for the duty to support as a commitment from service providers to better support families to stay together safely and to reduce the harm that comes with state intervention. In this project, we engaged mothers, fathers, grandparents, young parents, and youth who have all been impacted by the child welfare system, as well as the community organizations in the downtown east side that support them. Together, we generated data on how to move away from the punitive and disruptive state interventions to harm reduction alternatives and community-based support. Throughout our project engagements, community partnering organizations reflected on and implemented the findings from the families. The purpose of today is to share our learnings and present to you the scenarios of how to better support families and how we can apply these strategies to keep families together. I'll be drawing on these amazing panelists that are joining us today to give their perspectives from a mom, a social worker, and a nurse. But before all of that, I would like to invite Candace back to share a medicine wheel teaching that has guided us when designing the engagements, and also how we want to encourage you to think about when you're looking at wellness for yourself and for families. Candace.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So if you see, look on the screen, you see a beautiful medicine wheel. This, in many of our cultures, this is a beautiful tool that we've used to help us get wellness in our lives, to be able to practice wellness. It's an actual visual that we live. So as you see, you can see that there's 4 different colors. There's the white, there's the yellow, there's red and black. So we'll start off, the yellow represents the spring, and red is summer, fall is black, and winter is white. But if you also see, we have Mother Earth and the sky, water represented here as well. And there's so many other things that you can look at the medicine wheel for. Is if you look into the white section, we have the spiritual connection, which is, what I do to help me get every day I pray, I smudge, I do a what when I wash my face, I pray, I use a water cleansing, or even just go to the river and cleanse. So that would be my spiritual wellness. And for emotional, which is in the yellow, I when I'm having an emotional problem, I talk to elders, I visit my friends, or even spend time with family I love, you know. And then when I move into the red, you see it says mental. So mental on that, I take care of my mental wellness by say playing games, memory games, games of cards with the kids. We have deep discussions where we can learn off each other. Education or training is very important. I also used to love reading just for the heck of it. So that is also very good for your brain as well. And then if you look into the black, which also sometimes is other colors, blue or black, and it depends on which culture you're dealing with. So we have the physical, which is how I take care of myself is I eat, I sleep, I go to the doctors, I take my medicines. When it's cold, I dress warm. When it's hot, I cool down. So I take care of my wellness. Um, so in each of these there's a different animal that kind of looks over the doorways for these, and we see the buffalo and the spiritual, the deer, the wolf again is very very family oriented, and the bear is a very strong medicine. So quite often I would put anything medical needs would go into the physical aspect. um and if we look even farther, you can see if you look at the yellow, I'm sorry, I don't think we have a slide for this. We have the yellow is that the infant. In the yellow stage, you have the infant in the birth to infant. That's the age. And then if you go into the next quadrant, the mental, it is actually from toddler to youth. And then you go into the black, the people that are represented there are elders to death, and then into the white is the spiritual realm, elders and spiritual realm. So everything that we are doing in our lives are represented on the medicine wheel. And if you look in the middle with the creator, and that's what was kept us grounded and secure, is knowing that we had a higher power to keep us safe. So if you understand the medicine wheel, we look at the medicine wheel, we look at the world as round, it's circular. So everything that we see moves in circular. If you look at the waves move in circles. You look at the way Mother Earth spins, she rotates in circles. And then you look at the way Mother Earth rotates around the sun in circles as well. So everything that we see goes in circles. There's another one of my favorite teachings is when you look at the youth, where the babies are born, the infants and youth, they're born with no teeth and they're wrinkly and bald, and they go throughout life. And then as they're going older, they're getting taller and stronger and stronger. And then near the end, you can see that we're moving back into getting wrinkly and going bald and losing our teeth. So I heard that them drawing that before, and I'm like, wow, that is a complete circle as well. So everything we do, that we look in circles. One of the things that I think about when we're looking at the medicine wheel as a wellness tool is just picture a tire or a wagon wheel rolling down the road. Okay, you're running, and there's lots of bumps on that road, right? So if we don't keep that balance, say I'm not eating, I'm not sleeping, and I'm not dressing properly, and I'm still trying to roll down that bumpy road, I'm going to topple over once it hits the physical, and I'm going to fall because I'm not balanced. So I like to look at this medicine wheel to make sure we are balanced, and that our children and women are sitting in this medicine wheel. All of us fit in this medicine wheel. The yellow for Chinese, for the yeah, and we have the red for red people, the black for black people, and the white for white people. So all races are also represented on here as well.
Thank you, Candace. I just want to talk a little bit about colonization to set the stage of why this work is happening. Colonization was a deliberate practice that systematically removed Indigenous people from their culture. Colonized practice including forbidding language, ceremony, and medicine. Another major way Indigenous people were removed from their culture is by dismantling families through the residential school system, the 60 Scoop, and the child welfare system today. In our project, we were guided by elders and knowledge keepers to decolonize. Decolonization is the process of evaluating how colonized practice structures the current political, social, and economic system, and challenging those structures to support reclamation. An evaluation of the current child welfare system is well documented. We also have citations at the end. In our project, we're aiming to dismantle the colonized practice of the child welfare system by looking at alternative supports for families to reclaim their rights to be together. On this slide, there's a simplified diagram of the current system to clearly illustrate the cycle families are put through and how what we currently have does not work. If we start at the current system, the child that's removed from their home and taken to a foster placement or a group home. They're disconnected, they lose their sense of belonging, they lose their sense of agency, and experience a significant tear in their attachment, which affects their development. This is understood as complex trauma and is directly linked to unhealthy attachment as an adult, negative health outcomes, specifically feeling physical pain due to isolation and dysregulation. This also affects school, like this kid may have a hard time concentrating in class, performing in school. This may result in getting in trouble, interacting with the judicial system, both of which can affect employment later on. Then when that kid becomes pregnant or gets another person pregnant, they are judged by the system to be an unfit parent. And we go through the cycle again. The parent then experiences trauma again when their baby is removed from them and the child is entering their cycle, and the new child is entering their cycle for the first time. This clearly isn't working because severing connection is not a way to address trauma. And if we want to support children, we need to be supporting families. So we went straight to the families and asked them what it is that they need from their village. How can community organizations better support them to stay together? The first thing they said is to bring back culture. Culture has been systematically taken away from families, especially Indigenous families through colonization. And it is crucial to how families connect and take care of one another. Families are asking community organizations and healthcare to weave culture into support for families from the foundation and throughout every form of support. This contributes to a sense of belonging. It can also be medicine for the family. And when you're looking at an oppressed culture, like here in Canada, bringing in cultural practices is a way for a family to reclaim their power. The second learning we had is to be mindful around language. Check your bias in your language. Don't use colonial definitions of parenting, and don't make assumptions. People who are coming to see you are part of a family, even if they present to be alone. Parents don't stop being parents when they don't have access to their kids. So saying things like not actively parenting when a parent is restricted by the government from their children is harmful. Or even saying that children are in care when they're apprehended from their family, when they themselves often do not experience being cared for in the system. And it can imply that they weren't cared for in their family. Instead, we've been explicitly about the state intervention in their family lives. Families are also asking you to be transparent. Share what you know and what you're limited by. So often they're left in the dark when dealing with the child welfare system, and they're powerless against it. And share knowledge. You might be experts in your field, but families have expertise on themselves. Their dynamic, their traditions. Approach them with curiosity and humility. Recognize and value family members. Include family members' input and follow the family's lead to decide what supports are needed for their family. If you see something of concern, ask the family what they think of this. Include the family members that should be included. Don't assume that you're more concerned with the well-being of the family than they are with themselves. If there is a concern that is not addressed, ask about it and better understand the barriers that the family might have to address it, what supports you can offer to those concerns. Follow their lead in harm reduction. Supporting families to connect. Support families to connect, prioritize and facilitate access and visitation between family members by providing support, transportation, and space. So often, if a family member is not considered a key part by the court system, or if the family is not considered for unification by the system, then visitations are not supported. That means aunties, cousins, grandparents, and even dads are often isolated from the children. How can you facilitate that connection? Families are asking for visitation spaces where they can get together without feeling surveilled and are supported to connect. And finally, invest in relationships. Come to your work with an open heart. Trust is a two-way street. You got to start by trusting the family and strengthen community by connecting to other programs, other nurses, other social supports. Don't do this work alone. So often this work is done in isolation as organizations that are fighting a much larger system are trying not to draw attention to their work. There's a power in working together and of amplifying the work so that families feel supported and you also have support to continue to challenge the harms of the system. We're asking you to consider the harms of reporting and encourage you to apply the lessons our participants have generated in your practice and better support families to stay together. To help you apply these lessons and bring this work to life, we have 3 scenarios that we want to share with you. These scenarios are real experiences families have shared with us, where a call has been made, an anonymous call has been made. Our panelists will share the approach that they would have taken in their perspective as a mom, a social worker, and a nurse. I want to remind you that these are real scenarios and real families, so please treat them with respect and move this work forward in a meaningful way. For the first scenario, you're working as a doctor in a medical clinic. You have a drop-in patient come in on her own. She starts telling you about her mental health struggles, saying she can't sleep, she's constantly distraught. She got fired because she stopped showing up to work, and she's no longer able to function on her daily tasks. She tells you that she has no supports and that she gets overwhelmed having to take care of her granddaughter, who is a toddler. I'm going to start by passing it on to Carrie, a social worker, from her perspective.
Thank you, Linoy, and thank you for sharing the results of this amazing project that looks across an intergenerational viewpoint. So it's really great to see. I would start with being more curious about grandma's strengths. When we feel overwhelmed, we don't always see the strengths that may be present within ourselves or the supports that may be available or there for the individual. Sometimes we need to ask questions or help point out some of their strengths and bring more awareness for the grandma, what her strengths are. Really boost her up. Validate the small steps she's made. She mentioned that she was being overwhelmed, but she made it to the clinic. She got dressed and she got out the door to come and see you. Ask probing questions and curious questions. Who are some families, friends that could be available to support her? What community resources that is she connected to or have been connected to? Is she aware and whether you may need to support her in accessing community resources? Is she connected to an elder or cultural support? And also ask, other than the community resources, ask how did she make it to the appointment? What was different about today? Pull on those strengths within herself. And when asking questions, don't ask questions for information. Ask questions for curiosity. You're interested to hear her story. Lead with empathy and humility and take your time. Discuss a wellness plan with her. Just talking about the small steps in her life that have been manageable. Just tell me more about those steps you were able to manage to do. Just let me know what one simple step had been. Set small goals and always let her lead. If goals are set, follow up with her on her goals and see how she is doing. Discuss Indigenous cultural supports with her and see how connected she is to her culture. If she is not connected to her culture, would she like to be? potentially discussing Indigenous resources that may be available in her community. In Canada, on a federal level, we have Jordan's Principle, which is a program where she can potentially access funding to support her caregiving responsibilities. In the end, be familiar with the community resources available and collaborate as much as possible. Acknowledge taking care of a toddler can be overwhelming and busy. And as an older woman, the work running after a toddler could be even more tiring and challenging. And finally, be cognizant of how you document the interaction in the chart. Document the challenge she is facing as described, but also point out strengths that you recognize. Be transparent and factual in the documentation, but also document as if the patient is going to read it. Now I'm going to pass it on to Lorraine from a nurse perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. I'd like to share some things, what I've learned from many years working in Indigenous communities, both urban and rural. And as a public health nurse, I've been in many, many homes and gotten to know many families. I was privileged to work in these communities and have people who were willing to teach me about their culture and the meaning of respect. So as far as our scenario goes, as Carrie was saying, give her a warm welcome. Clinics can be very intimidating places. They're not neutral places. Often people have had negative experiences in healthcare. We know that systemic racism is well documented in healthcare and across many sectors. Be aware of the power differential and give her a chance to talk and describe what she's feeling. Validate the importance of her role in the family. She's the grandmother, she's caring for her grandchild. Affirm the importance of that role. She's providing security and a loving bond, and she's also teaching culture to her grandchild. She may be seen in her family as a pillar of strength, and so it might be hard for her to come and ask for help and be seen as vulnerable. Don't assume she is drug seeking. So often, when Indigenous people go into a clinic setting, they're told, "We don't prescribe pain meds or narcotics or sleeping pills." And immediately, the patient feels judged and discriminated against and will shut down and may not be feeling safe to communicate with you. So listen to what she's saying, really listen. Find out what she thinks will help her situation. And this might seem obvious or simple, but look at her when she's speaking. Now, so many of us use electronic medical records and computers in our interactions in the clinic. And sometimes doctors or nurses will have their back to the patient and they're typing away on the computer. Well, this can seem very disrespectful and alienating. So make contact with the patient by facing her. Again, it takes courage for her to admit that she's vulnerable. So find out what she thinks might help and what she needs, rather than assuming we know what's best for her. Help her identify friends or family that she can call on for support. Or sometimes people have moved from their home reservation to the city, and so they don't have those family connections and may not know many people. So social isolation can be one of the main issues here. She might not have the energy to make connections herself. And so you might ask some of your coworkers, if you have in your program, outreach workers or community health rep who can help her connect to resources that she might find helpful. Some practical suggestions: maybe she needs help with a disability application or a medical note to get her job back. You might be able to refer her to some cultural programs if she's not already connected. And if you do promise to do things for her or make connections, be sure to follow up. build trust by being reliable. If you tell her you're going to get in touch with her later, keep trying. If you can't reach her by phone, keep trying. Not everyone has minutes on their phone. And I've heard many times from families, oh, they said they'd get in touch with me and I never heard back from them. So that can be really frustrating and also cause people not to trust us. Building connections can help strengthen the community. Again, as Carrie mentioned, reassure her that the information she's sharing is confidential. She may fear that things she's told you could be used against her regarding her mental health or her care of the child. So be transparent in your documentation. When charting on the encounter, clarify with her that what you are recording is actually accurate and what she's actually told you. If she trusts that you're writing what she's talked to you about and not making judgments about her, she'll feel safer and she'll be able to trust more. I urge you to create the encounter so that she feels safe to return in the future if she needs help again. This is about relationship building. Again, be reliable, follow up with her later. And those are ways to build trust by being honest with her and transparent. I'd like to turn it over to Candace now for her perspectives as a mother and grandmother and her cultural teachings.
Hello, good afternoon, or good morning, some places like here. So can you imagine being a grandmother and having these kind of thoughts? It could be really hard to admit all of this. It could be hard to admit that I need help as an Indigenous mother, as a grandmother. It's so scary to ask for help because we're so used to having the MCFD or what the Vancouver Aboriginal Child Apprehension System, VACFAS. We get quite scared to ask for that help because sometimes when we say I need help, sometimes those calls are mandatory, and we're trying to change those calls. So can you imagine being that grandmother being scared to ask for help? So we really need to put their trust first. You know, confidentiality is so important, and that shows us that you have respect for us as people. You know, we don't want to be outed in any way, or whatever is going on in our lives. We need to keep that, you know, respected, and just let them know that we're holding on to their wellness and everything, privately and confidentiality. Don't forget, quite often being a grandmother chasing children, they're going to need help. So when she sits down, say, so my teammate's going to come take your children, so you and I can sit down and have a coffee and have a talk. So then having the baby run out close by gives mama that time, or grandma that time, to decompress and maybe talk to a counselor, an elder, some even peers such as myself, to look at their medicine wheels. You know, we look at where you're at in your medicine wheel. And I actually like to create the medicine wheel itself so we can see if there's balance and where the balance could be lifted, so that we can do more to support that area of their lives. It's so important as Indigenous folks to be able to offer them culture, to be able to say, here, we have an elder on site if you need brushing or smudging or cleansing. As a person that lives with culture and that actually does culture in the community, I find when I'm having an elder brush me down or an elder smudge me, it calms my spirit, it calms my heart, which then makes me be able to answer in a calmer manner. You know, it's just a good way to lift our spirits and help us advocate for ourselves, or build our own team to advocate when we're well taken care of. motherhood is overwhelming, never mind being a mother, so a grandmother, you know, so maybe sit down and create a care plan. So sometimes in some of these hospitals, you create these care plans and we sign them away, believing that if anything should happen to this child, that care plan will be followed, but that is not the case. So most often we are creating these care plans with our families and our organizations, our best friends in mind, when in actuality, it's just a piece of paper that is not being followed. So we're hoping that we can have some accountability with those care plans to be able to take care of mom and baby and grandmother, you know, whoever needs that support. One of the simple things that we overlook is transportation. Can you imagine if you had a bunch of children and you're trying to get on the bus and you're an elder? That would be so hard. So think about maybe sending them in a taxi voucher to pick them up to their appointments, to see a counselor, to see a social worker, to see a dentist. I would like to think of this as building a team. I myself like to have a team built around me. So whenever the ministry shows up, I'm like, okay, I'm calling my team, and my team meets them first and foremost. That way, what you think about my parenting doesn't hurt me. What you think about the way I'm living doesn't hurt me because I am poor, because I'm Indigenous. My parenting and my way of living looks different than yours. I know how to be poor. I don't know how to be rich. Remember, as an organization, if you're supporting these folks, to be accountable, to write everything down, to be able to show them, okay, we're going to do work on this week, and then we can work on that next week. Just be transparent with everything you're doing. We have to continue to check in with mom and grandmother, part of me. Just 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 times during the week, just like, are you okay this week? And do you need some food? Do you need anything? You know, just be consistent, check up and check in on them. We've lost so many people. We don't want to re-trigger that trauma by not showing up for that person. So if you're going to build this relationship and work and advocate and be a part of this person's team, I'm asking you, don't re-traumatize us and leave us. Do you know how scary that is? We finally build a trust, and all of a sudden, 3 months down the road, by the way, I'm leaving and so is taking over. That is like re-crushing everything that we just built. So if I'm asking, if you're going to be a part of our care team, stay, you know, and remember, we are people. We're very intelligent, you know. We know when you're being sincere. We know when you're being truthful and that you're actually there actively listening to us. So please don't treat us like we're dumb. Just talk to us like people and know that we are capable of it. Thank you. All my relations. And I'll turn back to Carrie.
I'll take it first.
Illinois, pardon me.
Thank you, Candace, and Carrie and Lorraine. I just wanted to share from our grandparents circle that the grandparents taught me that grandchildren are medicine for grandparents and grandparents are medicine for their grandchildren. The generational trauma and the multiple ruptures a family has gone through means that grandparents may have been restricted from their own kids, and now they're raising their grandkids. So it is so meaningful for us to support that connection and not break that connection when someone's asking for help, and instead address the barriers like all of you mentioned and identify how do we support them instead of rupture them. So, got it. Sorry, the scenarios have been wrong. Thank you for whoever tried to switch it and then I didn't follow suit. So the second scenario, which you've already seen on the screen, is you're working in a drop-in center that provides meals and clothing for donations. Sorry, we're back to the first. To folks in the low-income neighborhood. Your drop-in center also provides harm reduction supplies, including clean needles, pipes, and naloxone kits. One day, a mother comes in with her child who is in a stroller. They get food, and she also grabs some clean needles from the harm reduction area. She asks you when the next naloxone training will happen and expresses that she would like to sign up. And again, we'll start with Carrie.
Thank you, Linoy. As mentioned in the project findings, it is so important to check our biases at the door and focus on client strengths. Don't assume that the harm reduction supplies are for her. At times, this is a potential bias that providers can have when seeing a young mom with a child in a stroller and accessing harm reduction materials. Rather focus on strengths in the narrative. She came into the drop-in. She's asking for food and supports. She's asking for harm reduction supplies and naloxone training. In fact, what I'm hearing is that she's building safety for herself, for a family member or a friend, and for her community. I urge you to remember that substance use on its own and caring for a child is not a child protection concern on its own. In Canada, child protection is a provincial legislation, and each province has varying legislation acts that governs child welfare. However, child protection overall should really be looking at how substance use may impact parenting. What I mean by that is really don't assume that parents who use substances are not fit parents. This is another potential bias that we've come across. There is ongoing discrimination and stigma on families who are low income or Indigenous, racialized people, or families who are experiencing multiple challenges. They are not seen as having the capacity to parent safely while using substances. Whereas in high-income families who potentially regularly use substances, they're going to parties, they're going to business meetings and going out afterward, but they have nannies, caregivers, or their kids are involved in programming. They're rarely seen in the eyes of child protection. How come the two family situations can be viewed potentially so differently in our society? Build trust and connection, and that has been mentioned in the project findings and in our previous scenarios. The goal in this case is really to have her come back and engage, and don't overwhelm her. Don't ask too many questions, just be there. And again, we've mentioned transparency and being genuine. As a social worker, I am always cognizant of the historically negative impact the social work profession has had on Indigenous families. So I work hard to build that trust and relationship and be transparent and genuine and able to support families. And that goes back to the engagement. Working on the engagement, just offering simple, practical supplies and just engaging in simple conversations, just connecting as humans. We are natural beings that want connection, just being there for that person as a friend or somebody just for an ear. And when that relationship is formed, she is actually more likely to ask for help when there is that trust built and she doesn't feel judged. And as you spend time with her and gather more information and really know her story, you can further see if that original bias of, oh, she's asking for all the harm reduction supplies, I'm concerned, really further see whether that it was a real child protection concern or not, and support her if it is. I will turn it over to Lorraine for further thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Yes, I'd like to reiterate some of what Carrie has said. So don't assume she's using drugs. And even if this young mother is, don't assume that makes her an unfit parent. She might not feel safe or any trust if she fears a punitive response, because she's probably very familiar with how she's been treated as a young mother, probably living in poverty, these marginalizing conditions, racism, poverty, the stigma of substance use. So you want to be sure to give her a warm welcome and approach her in an open manner and give her space when she's collecting the harm reduction supplies so she doesn't feel scrutinized or shamed. We want to encourage people to use harm reduction supplies, and so that they're not feeling shamed or embarrassed. We want harm reduction supplies and supports to be easily accessible for people. For those who are not so familiar with harm reduction, it's a client-centered approach that seeks to reduce the social and health harms associated with substance use, but without requiring people to stop using drugs. The harm reduction approach provides people who use substances a choice of how they will minimize the harms. And this is done in a non-judgmental and non-coercive way, with the goal of giving people the skills and knowledge to live safer and healthier lives. Using harm reduction efforts will decrease the risks of people contracting infections like HIV and Hep C and other serious infections. In Vancouver, we currently have an epidemic of opioid overdose deaths, and this is from a toxic, illicit drug supply. So we want to avoid shaming people from accessing harm reduction supplies because shame and stigma deter people from getting the supplies and the support they need. Harm reduction supplies might include clean needles, syringes, pipes, and Narcan kits. Because remember, the first step in addressing substance use issues is keeping people alive. So with this young mother who's come to your center, instead of starting the conversation about the harm reduction supplies, focus on her as a mother and her child and her strengths. A neutral approach may help her feel less judged and more welcomed. Praise her for coming in today and getting what she needs. Offer things for herself and the baby. Maybe you have donations you can offer. Every mother needs diapers or maybe formula or food and snacks, bus tickets, because we know transportation is often a barrier for people to get their needs met. And I urge you to give positive feedback to her about her interest in the naloxone training she wants. You might say something like, "That's so great, because the more people who learn how to use Narcan, the better. And you never know when you might need to help somebody." Again, for people who aren't familiar, Narcan is another name for naloxone. And this is a medication that's an opioid antagonist. So when it's administered, it can reverse the effects of the opioids and hopefully revive the person if they are overdosing, and thus preventing death. Most often, naloxone is administered by injection, and anyone can learn how to do that. But nasal Narcan is also available now in some settings. So it's really important that we support all people to have easy access to harm reduction supplies and safety measures, and not let our own discomfort and bias get in the way of that. So providing teenagers and young people, pregnant women, people who are parenting, the elderly, providing easy access for all those people is really important, because all categories of people use substances and are at risk of overdose. With this young mother, you can give her information about other places she can get harm reduction supplies if your center is closed. And spread the word in your communities about where Narcan kits and people who are trained in that are available. That helps to strengthen your community and your connections. And again, be reliable. So if you've said you're going to do something for her or get something for her, follow through with that. And that's how we can build trust. And now I'd like to turn it over to Candace.
Thank you. I'm sitting here listening to my co-presenters and just remembering a few things. I'm hearing when we go through this, I'm sure you can hear us. We're talking, we're kind of repeating what we're saying. And in our culture, when we repeat, the elders say, if you hear repeating, if we to repeat, that means we need you to learn. So I'm listening and I'm smiling because we're all saying, reiterating what's important. We need to learn these and make these changes. You know, as a mother, an Indigenous mother in the downtown East Side, you know, I have many strikes against me just because I'm a recovering addict. I'm Indigenous. I live in the downtown East Side and I have poverty. Apparently, that's enough to have my children took away, even though I haven't done drugs in almost 14 years, 14, 15 years coming. And I'm still being harassed by the systems that want to take my children. So again, as a mother, I'm already struggling with addiction, and it could be quite embarrassing to ask for help. You know, it's very lonely to navigate these organizations, whether it's healthcare or if it's child apprehension system or police brutality. It's hard to navigate these. So we really need to feel trust. So like, again, I'm saying, asking, you know, offer her a drink, offer her water, coffee, sit her down, say, have a seat, you know, while you take care of her children, help her feel cared for, because you don't know when the last time they actually felt cared for. As single moms in the downtown East Side, quite often we're navigating all these systems by ourselves. You know, so it's really important to be able to help them feel centered and grounded and cared for, whether it's through offering an elder or smudging. You know, I like to offer medicine bags, which, you know, quite often I wore throughout my fighting for my children. I wore medicine bags and I held on to them as my strength. And I had continued fighting for my children. I never give up and I hold on to my medicines. So quite often you check in with your mom to make sure that, you know, her medicine wheel is in balance. Offer her food to take home, diapers, whatever they need. You know, just because they're accessing naloxone and pardon me, just because they're accessing needles and paraphernalia, you know, it could be for her boyfriend, it could be for her, you know, sister, it could be, just don't assume it is hers. You know, she's doing her best, you know, and remember to keep telling her there's nobody to help. Didn't have validation growing up. Some of us didn't have our parents to validate us. So to self-validate is the hardest thing to do. So to have outside sources say, Candace, you're doing well. Candace, you're a great mom. Candace, your children are safe. That builds me up from the inside out. You know, remember, naloxone training is so important. No matter who, what, when, or where you are, this addiction has no boundaries. You know, they don't care what race you are. They don't care how old you are. So our trainings have to be geared to to those very people. I remember watching a young mom, in recovery who let her children go through the naloxone training. You know, at first I thought it was silly, and then I think about it. What if they came in and found their mom? They would have to be the ones to administer those. So luckily here in Vancouver, we have a number to call where you can actually create your own naloxone training for your children, you know, to if you want to make it more intimate or, you know, youth centered. So we build our own programs if it's not there. That's one thing I love about the downtown east side. One of the most embarrassing things is being asked about is my substance use. If I've used today, how much I've used, you know, are my children safe? You know, right away, I feel like you're judging me. And you may not be, but like I said, without having the proper adequate upbringing, I automatically assume people are judging me because of also history showed that we lived a life of judgment. So just, you know, be gentle with us. And you, one of the beautiful things that I like to do about when we're in our culture, doing about our culture is we talk to our medicines, whatever medicine that comes from Mother Earth. We talk to it to amplify it, to awaken these medicines to help us heal, to help us touch us in whatever way. And I once watched this Indigenous woman who worked in OPS, and she says, "Can you imagine if you can talk to your medicines that you're using that day to get better? Can you imagine if you talk to that medicine to actually do the work that you needed to do?" And I just like, boom, my mind was blown. I'm like, boom, awaken the medicines so that we can make a connection to do the healing or whatever work that needs to be done within us. It's so important, again, as my co-presenters had all mentioned, it's so important to keep reiterating how good she's doing, that you're here to support her, that if there's any problems, we'll call with you. We won't make any calls without you. So it's important for you to be able to continue building our strengths. Again, some of us struggle to be able to build our own strength or even just take a compliment. So thank you very much. I'll turn it back to my presenters, co-presenters.
Thank you, Candace. And as far as compliments go, you're doing amazing. Thank you. I wanted to speak here about the mortality rate that increases for mothers who have had their child removed from them. In this project, we tragically lost a mom and a youth who were participating in our circle, both of which were isolated from their families due to and they died due to the contaminated supply. So supporting people who are using substances to reduce the harm of the contaminated supply is crucial. And a mom shouldn't have to choose between having her kids or getting safe needles or clean supplies. The consequences shouldn't be so big for her to put that risk on her, which often moms do have to do. Going into scenario 3, we're skipping one of the scenarios. So you're working as a police officer, you get a call late in the evening of a noise complaint in a subsidized housing program. When you arrive, the scenario. When you arrive, you're intervening in an intimate partner violence situation, end up arresting the male partner for breaching his parole agreement. Both partners are distraught and they have 4 children in the home. What do you do next? And again, we'll start with Carrie. Thank you.
Thank you, Linoy. Firstly is importance of completing a safety plan for the evening and really let her lead the safety plan. Trying to keep the family in the home if possible. Is there a neighbor or a friend that can come and stay with them and, you know, and help them? It can be really hard to bring 4 kids and go to another place for the night. I wanted to mention that, Indigenous families fear child protection response due to the historical and really colonialistic relationship with whether it's a child welfare system or police response. Both can be really reactive, and the community needs to be proactive in supporting children and keeping children safe in their homes. And what does that mean? It means working to build protective supports for the families rather than react. Support them if there is a duty to report that needs to be made, and be transparent about it. Ask what supports does the family need. Have the family lead in developing a safety plan. And this scenario happened in the evening, and if there is a duty to report, if possible, assessing could a safety plan be in place in the evening, and then making the report. You're still keeping the children safe and the mom safe in their home, and then still following the legislative duty. And people wonder how come we would do that, and this is if we're able to create that safety plan. It's really to reduce the trauma for the family. It gets so late when the emotions are high, and the kids are tired. In different provinces, they potentially have systems that are responding that doesn't know anything about the family, and there's limited resources. So if we can build a community within the family, she's in subsidized housing, is there any family or friends that can help out? That would really reduce the trauma overall for the family. Be more curious about why he might have breached and get to know the family. There could be other reasons why, other than that other reasons why. Is he trying to come? She has 4 children she's raising on her own, and is he trying to come and help with his children and risk breaching to help her? I mean, in the end, I hope that we would be more empathetic of the family situation and just hear what their story is and really think about your approach. Are you enforcing the separation that be experienced as punitive rather than supportive? And are we pushing the family with more punitive measures, even when we know it takes several times for a victim to leave an abusive relationship? And have we followed a woman-led approach to address the violence and ensure her children safely, or sought creative approaches if the family goal is unity? And if the family did want to stay together, how do we support the father in addressing the violence and not further alienate him from the family? I leave you to think about these questions as I pass you over to Lorraine. Thanks.
Thank you, Carrie. Yes, entering this situation, it's really important to be aware of the power differential. Police are going into a home where there's been an upset. Everyone's feeling vulnerable. The family may be very mistrustful. As we've mentioned, systemic racism across all sectors is well documented. So the mistrust you observe from the family is very understandable. If they're afraid, they don't feel safe. And it's important to create a feeling of safety. Reassure them that nothing's going to happen right now. There won't be a knee-jerk reaction to remove the children immediately. Hopefully you can find supportive measures to keep the family together. Consider the children's emotional safety along with physical safety if there's any broken glass or such. Mom and children need to feel safe. They don't need an additional trauma. They probably fear that the children will be removed. Make it clear that nothing has to happen immediately. Like Carrie said, you can make a safety plan and keep people safe, and nothing's going to happen right away. I urge you to really examine your own assumptions and biases when you assess the home that you walk into. your own biases about what a proper home should look like. So if you observe something like empty refrigerator, empty cupboards, most often this means poverty, not neglect. So often these families are judged, families who live in poverty and also suffer racism and stigma. People jump to conclusions that it's an unfit home. I know of a situation, a police officer described this to me. He and his coworkers reported to a call in a family like this, where there was a domestic disturbance. And the police decided that because all the children slept on mattresses on the floor, that this was an inadequately cared for family and that the parents weren't doing a good job. Well, there are many variations, cultural variations. And remember that as far as domestic life and parenting, there are many ways to do it right. I've seen, been in Indigenous homes where the parents use cradle boards and moss bags with their babies. Some have constructed swinging hammocks to keep the babies comforted and safe. All the children were well cared for and they weren't left unattended, but these were different cultural ways of having a family that everyone may not be familiar with. So it's important not to judge, but to have an open mind when you see variations. Keeping mom and children together is most important and best for everyone. If there's not someone the family can call for support, as Carrie was saying, maybe a neighbor or family, because some families are very isolated and they don't have family and friends close by. If that's the case, consider a family shelter where mom and children could go together. And also make a connection, help that family feel safe so that in the future, they will feel comfortable calling if they need help again. And again, as Carrie was mentioning, consider that most likely this dad wants to be a part of the family. So much of our system fractures families, the residential school system, the foster care system, the prison system. They probably want to be a family together. So we have to think of ways to support this family, to reintegrate this dad into the family and into society. These men are not throwaway people. They need support too, to undo some of the harm that's been done, the intergenerational harm through this systemic racism. So referrals to cultural groups, things like Warriors Against Violence, engaging with traditional elders, those are all appropriate supports. And again, basics, providing basics for the family like transportation, food, whatever they might need in the immediate time. As far as other referrals, in the future, you might refer the family to like a public health nurse or outreach worker, community health rep, who can go into the home and help the family identify what some of the needs they have and then provide those supports so the family can feel better and have more resources. So thank you. On to Candace now.
Sorry. This one is one of my favorite pieces. I can go on forever for all of these topics. This one in particular, it touches me. When I read this, I think about some of the women that we've worked with. So I'm going to just openly, candidly say, when you call to report, what happens is the children are taken aside away from mother, and they're taken aside and they're questioned by strangers. And then in the other room, the mother's being questioned by strangers as well. And then also in another room or another time, other family members that are in the house, the men, or your grandfather, whatever, they're also questioned as well. So not only are we creating that fear, we're awakening that intergenerational trauma, so these people are being scared and taken apart, and the children are being traumatized through this process. So now you've deemed this family unsafe, so dad has to leave. Dad's not allowed back in the house. Grandpa's not allowed back in the house if you want to keep your children. So now our men have become homeless, and during this time of overdose awareness, we're losing so many of our Indigenous folks that are top of the list, as in the research in plain sight. You can see that we are on the top of the list for many, many illnesses, for deaths, for COVID, for child apprehension, HIV. We are overrepresented in most of these let's call them voids, spiritual voids. And so when I look at this, I look at this through a colonial lens. It's so easy to be looked down upon in the downtown east side as an Indigenous person. There's so much history between police brutality, RCMP, which was created to help with the Indian problem. The RCMP still has not been dismantled. And we also have the Indian agents who came and took our children. So we still have the child apprehension system, and as we heard, jail systems. Our men are being or overrepresented as well in the jail systems. They're being taken away from their partners, their children, their families, and they're not allowed to be parents. They're ripping apart that circle of kin that our families had pre-contact. And I am going to explain what the circle of kin is. The circle of kin is that there's picture a bunch of circles in the middle. There's a bunch of children that are being taken care of. And around those children, moms are circling those children and looking after those children. So mom is in that circle, the next circle, and outside there's another circle of family members, and those are the aunties and the cookums. So grandmas, sisters. So if mom should fall down, get sick, or something should happen, then it is our Indigenous responsibility, not right, our responsibility to care for that child as they are part of our community. And then what is missing today is the last circle, which is the circle of men that are looking out. And they were the providers, they were the protectors. They brought us deer and venison and fishing, and those all were taken away from us. And so now there is nothing left for the men to do. So just trying to be parents. One of our beautiful participants who are no longer with us, I was my neighbor, and I watched how beautiful they were. They fed their kids, such beautiful meals. And they're always grabbing people as they walk by. They'd grab people and say, come and eat. And you'd walk by and you'd look and you'd see dad lovingly holding that baby all the time. And every time I seen that, my heart warmed. And then to find out that there was an issue with him being in the home and not being there, it broke my heart, because I knew what kind of a good dad, what kind of good families these people were. And yet these systems still took the children, apprehended the children, kicked the dad out of the house, and the mom is now relapsed, which as we know, when we relapse, chances of dying are very high. And we did lose that particular sister, so we're hoping during this time that that we can send the men to programs such as Warriors Against Violence, Battered Woman Society, WAVA. So these are programs run by Indigenous. Some of these programs are run by Indigenous folks for Indigenous folks. We need more of those programs. It is important at these programs we learn about the spiral of abuse. Abuse just doesn't happen. There's a spiral, and there's a rhythm almost to what abuse before the abuse happens. So it's important to learn these spiral of abuse and how to manage your anger. See, these things were not taught to us, and these things were taken away from us because many of our parenting would have taught us how to deal with our anger. They would have taught us how to self-regulate. However, we weren't given that. That was taken away from us through colonization, residential school, foster care, the Indian agents, the RCMP. These were all taken away from us. So we have to relearn how to even just feel without hurting ourselves. As we know, addiction is a family disease, and we use addiction as a way to cope with pain and hurt. So that's what I'm saying. We don't want to hurt ourselves anymore. I'm asking for supports for parents, instead of sending dad to jail. Ask what is it he needs, and is there someplace safe? Because it's just continuing that abuse, that cycle of abuse that the system is carrying out on our people by sending him to jail. You're now taking him away from his family again, and you're re-traumatizing his children and traumatizing his wife just by sending him to jail. Men are often taken out of our circles, and we don't want to take them away, but we want to make sure that our women are safe. So what can we do? Let's work with dad. Let's work with mom. Give them the resources they need. Give them the education of what's in the community to advocate for them, to be there, to be in these circles. Thank you very much. I'm going to return it to my team.
Thanks, Candace. Yes, so as mentioned, many of our participants shared having their children removed from them after they experienced violence and contribute to blame. They put themselves at higher risk to hide in order not to face the consequences of losing their children. And going back to, just like Candace said, in our cycle, removing the children from the home disrupts their attachment and then develops a dysregulated trauma response, which then contributes to unhealthy relationships. And we just repeat that cycle of intimate partner violence again. Our whole point, our whole project is how can we intervene in supportive ways? How can we wrap around supports for each member of the family to facilitate connection, to have a harm reduction approach, and not keep doing what we're doing, which is restricting families and repeating the cycle. Here we have the community commitments that families have asked for from members of our community. And I'm just gonna move it to the last slide to just say thank you everyone for participating, and thank you for all of the stories that the families have shared with us so that we can share with you. We know that the intention that they had is for the positive intention to make change in their community came at a cost of reliving their traumatic memories. And so we're very grateful to have all of them share what they did with us. And we ask you to, as people who've received their knowledge and their teaching, to move it forward in a positive way. We appreciate your time. And I don't know if there's time for question and answers, but yeah, maybe I'll put it back. Thanks, Carrie.
Sure. That was so amazing. Thank you so much. We have about 5 minutes left. So I think maybe we have time for 2. And if we can keep it on this community commitments slide, that would be great. There was a request for that. So we've had so much amazing participation in the chat section, and we've had so many incredible questions, and we won't be able to get to all of them, but we are hoping that we can share these Q&A with the presenters, and that you can answer them and we can distribute them out to participants at a later time. But so one thing that folks kind of consistently asked was, where can they find your project findings?
We'd be happy to share that along. This project was a grant project, and so we don't have a website and things like that, but we're working on it, and we will be sharing all of our findings with you, Jessica, to distribute.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I guess anything that comes up, we can link to this webpage, the recording webpage of this webinar. So keep an eye on that. Yeah, we have a minute. So I'd like to bring on my co-worker, Ajirogana Evi. I'd like to come on camera.
Hello. Yes, Chief and True. I think we have one question here. I'll just pass it on and any one of you can answer. So one of the audience has asked, what is the best way to balance keeping families together alongside immediate safety concerns or cases where the lifestyle of mothers and or the environment may be unsafe for the children?
And maybe if one of you can just answer, because I am aware of the time.
And I could just put it in the chat as well. So they're curious about balance with all that is happening, especially for mothers. How can they balance when it comes to safety and their lifestyle?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. So what is the best way, I guess maybe almost like what's your reaction or your comment to balance keeping families together alongside immediate safety concerns or cases where the lifestyle of the mother and or the environment may be unsafe for the children?
I'm comfortable to answer this because I actually live in the downtown east side. I've actually witnessed mothers, and I've actually been mentoring how I do it when they come for me. I don't answer the phone when I know that it's them. So what I've seen is we have their organizations step in. They come in, whether it's the doctors or the nurses, they'll come in and weigh the baby, bring diapers, bring formula, and if mom needs food or milk, they bring that. If they need a social worker, there's a social worker in their office, to be able to come into the home and visit where you're comfortable and safe has been one of the greatest strengths I see, is when they come in and bring the supports, or even come with them to medical appointments, to VACFAS appointments, MCFD, which is our child apprehension system here in Vancouver. So going to the appointments with them, providing transportation, providing, it's so important to write everything that you hear in those meetings in VACFAS or MCFD, because there is a truth known that they fib, and that things are not exactly as they say. So it's important to write everything down. I never go anywhere alone. I always make sure that there's somebody backing me up and that I have an elder. A lot of people do not know that once the children are in our care, that if we are actually practicing our culture, it is harder for them to come in and take our children. So I tell all my participants, keep smudging, keep praying, keep drumming, because it is so much harder to take our children away from us if we are practicing our culture. And again, keeping that medicine wheel close by and keeping all CBOs accountable for their piece. So again, the doctors are connecting with the social workers. The social workers are connecting with the teachers. Like our teachers are also part of our team as well. So I don't know if I can answer it any more than that. So I'll leave it there.
That was well said, well articulated, and all the great examples that you provided as well. Thank you, Candice.
Thank you. So unfortunately, that is all the time we have today, but we are so grateful to the 4 of you for dedicating your time and for truly doing this incredible work. So we also want to say thank you to our interpreters, Dean and Joanne, as well as Caroline and Sylvie. And then I want to say thank you to the entire KH and LN team for working in the background, Jade, Jasmine, Margarita, Annalie, Sabri, and Katrina. So thank you so much, and keep an eye, all of the resources and slides will be sent to you, and keep an eye on the website. We will see you next time.